Hey folks, welcome back to the Dyson Sphere program, and welcome to something a little bit different for my channel. Normally, I play what's called the long play style of Let's Plays, where I literally show you every single thing I do. I play the entire game from start to finish without any editing. Makes it easier for me, and some people like it. But at this point of the game, I needed to go back and make a bunch of stuff that we'd already done. I needed to make a bunch of proliferator, I needed to make a bunch of super magnetic rings, I needed to lay out a whole load of fractionators to get deuterium and such. So for this episode, I've recorded about 3 hours of gameplay and sped it up about 4 times, down to about the 45-minute mark. And I'm going to be narrating over the gameplay sped up. So let me know in the comments below, what do you think about this? I'm going to tell you everything that I'm doing and thinking as I was going through it, but we won't have to sit there and watch me actually do it in real time. Curious to know whether this type of video is interesting to you. Anyway, so we're heading to the coal mine to set up, I believe, energetic graphite. We need some of that for our current objective. And along the way, I stopped to recharge because it was like a 25 light year trip. So since I had stopped here at the mine, or I forget exactly where I was going, but we stopped at the mine along the way to recharge, and then I decided to take out this dark fog base while I was here. As you can see, a simple set of missile turrets and a few battlefield analysis bases and signal towers makes it very easy. So you'll see I'm setting up my starvation protocol here, and then we'll clean up all the stuff we brought with us. Let's see where I'm actually going. I can't quite remember what I was doing here. The overall goal is to build super magnetic rings, and I don't even actually get into that this episode because I realize I need a ton more proliferator than I actually have. So I think I started out here with energetic graphite. This was meant for something else. I needed the energetic graphite for... I can't quite remember, but that's definitely what I'm producing here. So we used an existing blueprint. I made sure that we were exporting it from the South Pole, and then I flew off to whatever I was doing next. You can see here I'm setting up some basic defenses because the hive does exist in this cluster, and so I want to make sure that stuff doesn't get too destroyed. So what is this? I'm going home, it looks like. Heading back to Alwade. And perhaps I'll remember what exactly I was doing here. There's the trip to Alwade complete. I think I'm checking in on the science here, debating whether to add more science labs to speed up the science, but I decided against it because I realized I don't have the throughput on red cubes that I would need for that. So next up is a stop at the mall to fill up on stuff, and now I do remember what we were doing. I was thinking, I believe I was thinking that as part of the reason we need the super magnetic rings is to go into deuteron fuel rods. We need a lot of those to produce the small carrier rockets, and so I knew we were going to need a ton of resources from a gas giant. We're going to need a ton of hydrogen and deuterium rather. So I'm, in addition to just kind of restocking everything from the mall here, you may have noticed I grabbed 40 orbital collectors, the thought being that I would find some gas giant near Better Dyson from which we could source that hydrogen. And as I recall now, my plan is to, yeah, here we go. I'm looking nearby Better Dyson for a gas giant. So I'm kind of looking at all the nearby planets, and we can see here I get very excited because I realize that not only can I collect hydrogen there, I can collect raw deuterium, which means fewer fractionator loops that I have to build. Anyway, I ended up naming the system Beantown and the gas giant itself Gassy Steve. No deeper meaning there, just a couple fart jokes. And we're going to make our way over here and set up our orbital collectors to harvest that sweet hydrogen and deuterium for use in our deuteron fuel rod build. Now, I do get interrupted, so we don't even get to the deuteron fuel rods. But you're going to see here, I'm going to start out by placing down 40 orbital collectors on Gassy Steve here. And I was so excited, I'm pretty sure that I named the episode Gassy Steve and have a screenshot planned for it that shows off how much hydrogen and deuterium I can collect. Another thing I thought about while I was doing this, and again, in real time, it was 4 times slower. If you look in the, at the F3 key, I think, no, the F5 key, you can see the number gradually decreasing as I place them from 40. We're halfway through now. But I noticed about this point that I wasn't running out of daylight, and I realized I was moving with the rotation of the gas giant and placing these just fast enough to stay on the light side as the planet rotated. So the planet's rotating to the left underneath me, I'm flying to the right, and thereby keeping myself in the path of the sunlight. So yeah, this was pretty tedious. Another reason that I decided to speed this up. I think I had the idea right about here that I would speed everything up. And so as we reach the end, I checked the throughputs, and it's 500 per minute of hydrogen and 90 per minute of deuterium, and I get very excited, and I take a screenshot here, I think. I travel over to the sun, and I'm like, I gotta get a good screenshot of these numbers. They're so exciting. So you'll see the rest of the UI kind of catch up as I now head back to Better Dyson 1 to put that energetic graphite that we got earlier to use. So we're warping back. And let's see, what am I going to build here? We're going to take some copper, set down some copper smelting. That all looks fine. I reduced it to the number we actually need. And then I think I power everything up. So we needed, for whatever reason, we needed like 14 copper smelters here. I think I was still working towards the supermagnetic rings here, was the idea. I think that's what the energetic graphite was for. It goes into some part of this build, this equation. So then I started asking for deuterium and proliferator and realizing I don't have any for some reason. And I got the idea that, okay, I've been requesting proliferator on enough planets now that I don't have it anymore. Like, there's not enough to go around. So it's at this point that I realize I'm going to need a big-ass build for more proliferator. And I decided I would do like a big build. I would like follow up on the strategy we've been using in recent episodes, and I would do a big build. So one thing that I want, we're going to go back to the mine to produce the Mark 1 proliferator. But later on, I searched the cluster for locations for the, I believe it's the kimberlite ore and the stalagmite crystals, because those can be used to make the diamonds and the carbon nanotubes that we need for Mark II and Mark III proliferators. And it's a lot easier to make them that way and harvest those resources. So we come back to the mine, and the first thing we're going to do is set up a Mark I proliferator big build. So I'm kind of messing around with what's required here. I'm thinking about, like, how am I going to lay this out? Which parts am I going to build here? And I'm looking around for a coal vein that I can use, and I find one there. Okay, so we're going to fly over there. I'm going to set up an advanced miner. Managed to hit 22 veins. And then I'm going to take one of my manufacturing blueprints. I think, yeah, the circuit boards work just fine. We'll set that down somewhere. There's like an oil seep there that we can't build over. So I end up putting in some foundation, and we throw down the blueprint and convert it from making circuit boards to making Mark I proliferator, which does leave like an extra little bit of space where the second input belts would be that we don't really need. You can see here I'm copying the Mark I proliferator recipe around, getting rid of the extra belts and the extra sorters. So there's removing all the extra sorters. It takes a minute. to figure it all out correctly. Okay, now we got to change this over to request coal, and we're going to proliferate the inputs, which we don't normally do on this blueprint. So here comes the coal, and then we'll set up our output, and we'll power everything on. Here I'm doing math to figure out, for the blueprint, I want the inputs and outputs. So each one of these manufacturers does, I think, 120 recipes per minute. And here I'm setting the inputs and outputs to buffer for a full minute. So I'm going to copy this to a blueprint in a minute and set up the values. But it's something like 3,600 coal. I think I'm thinking through whether or not, yeah. So we're going to need, I think I realized here, the belt will not be able to carry enough coal. So 1,800 is like the maximum that the belt can carry out of the tower. So we're going to have some extras producing here. Yeah, so there's 15 on a side, and we can only support 12. So we'll take three of the manufacturers at the end of that chain, and we'll give them their own input lines of coal, and then their own output lines as well. Here you can see I'm setting up the blueprint. This is going to produce 4,500 Mark I proliferator per minute, apparently. Takes 3,600 coal. Okay. So I'm trying to figure out how to connect up the power. And once it's all turned on, did I get the... you know what? It wasn't the input lines that couldn't carry enough. It was the output lines that couldn't carry enough. That's what I did. So we could carry enough coal on the input lines. We couldn't carry enough proliferator Mark I on the output line. So that's what those three at the end of each ended up with their own output line going into the middle there. And now I'm just setting up some defenses because, again, the hive does exist in this planet, and I don't know where they're going to set down. So laser turrets are really nice for like a little bit of defense. It just makes it so that you know, if you combine it with a battlefield analysis tower, it'll eventually defeat simple early, like low-level raids. Like something might get damaged, but the battlefield analysis base will kill it, and the laser doesn't need any special ammo, so it's pretty handy. All right, now we're flying back to Better Dyson. We've got the proliferator Mark I, so next up, I need to recharge and then find a planet to go to. Oh, it looks like that's right. The kimberlite ore is here. So we're going to make the diamonds here. And here I'm changing my flowchart so I can see the numbers that I want. And I'm figuring out, if I've got 4,500 proliferator Mark I, how much can I make of proliferator Mark III? So I'm gradually adjusting the numbers on the proliferator Mark III to see, with that input, what can I build. And it looks like 1485 is what I can build based on the Mark I that I'm going to have available. So 1485 becomes our target, 1485 proliferator Mark III per minute, and that tells me how much diamond I need. So we're going to come over here to the kimberlite. We will set down our advanced miner, and here I'm starting to figure out math. I'm trying to figure out, like, what can I do? From the kimberlite, we can do 40 recipes per second, and that makes 80 diamonds per minute. And so I come back and check how many diamonds I need. So you can see I figure out I need 23 assemblers making diamonds from this stuff to match my recipe. So I'll go ahead and reuse an existing smelter recipe that we have, which in this case was high purity silicon. We'll refactor it to make diamonds from kimberlite ore. I only need 23 and we have 30 here, or rather 40 smelters. So that's the 23 smelters. We're changing our inputs on the tower to request kimberlite ore and output diamonds. We'll continue refactoring this blueprint to work here, and then I'll probably copy it down. Looks like I'm connecting it up to power and realizing it's still making silicon. So there's the kimberlite ore. Now I paste out the recipe onto all of the smelters. And we can see it's filling up the tower with diamonds. Last step is to head to the South Pole and set up a way to ship those out to wherever I end up actually making my proliferator. Now, I can't remember whether I think we came back to this system, but I think I ended up making the proliferator on another planet. So this ended up being useful. So our South Pole here requests some warpers from the North Pole in case they need them, and then we set it up to send home. Yeah, here's me setting up the warpers. A little logistics bot to send warpers to the South Pole. Head back there to check that that's working. We have an available route. So now we can ship our diamonds wherever we need them. And the next step is going to be to find the stalagmite crystal, which is used to make the carbon nanotubes we need. So for Proliferator Mark III, you can see we need carbon nanotubes. We need 1403 per minute. So the next step is to figure out, use this tool to figure out, okay, how do we make that from stalagmite crystals? And we can see, I went a little fast there because it was at 4x speed, but we need to find a location that has stalagmite crystals. And we end up needing 2 planets. There's not enough, there's some here at Clement Star, but there's not enough to support the demand. So we'll go to Clement Star first. And we'll set up, we'll mine some stalagmite crystals, turn them into carbon nanotubes. But then we're going to have to find another planet. And it ended up being really far away, so it's a bit of a hassle. But I did have an opportunity once I got there to do something else interesting, which we'll talk about when we get there. So here I'm checking out, I'm actually already mining some of these and turning them into carbon nanotubes here. So we're gonna preserve this existing mechanic. It's being used for Proliferator, but it's a small build. So we'll set down the miner. We'll reconnect it to that existing line. And then we'll figure out what rate we need to mine these at to support both this local build and the bigger build we're planning for. So then we'll go over to some free space. We'll start working on stalagmite miners. Or smelters, rather. So apparently I decided to do this build by hand without using an existing blueprint. Which is a weird choice for me, but I guess my thinking at the time was probably I don't have a build that really uses chemical plants. In fact, that is the reason. So we didn't have a build that used chemical plants, and as such, we had to build this by hand. Okay, so I'm figuring out inputs and outputs. We're going to need a bunch of chemical plants here, turning the stalagmite crystals into carbon nanotubes. So I set the recipe here. Now I'm doing math to figure out how many I need. We do 15 recipes per minute here, and each recipe requires 6 stalagmite crystals. So that's going to get us to 90 per minute. And that means that we can support 20 on one line of crystals from the tower, because 90 times 20 is 1800, which is how many our Mark III belt can support. So I think I ended up doing 40 here or something along those lines. No, I think I ended up doing 20 total. 90, yeah, 10 on a side. Did I get that right in my head? 15 recipes per minute times 6 crystals. So 2 is 30. And 3 is 90, yeah. Well, whatever. I ended up deciding to do 20 on a line, which is half what it can support, I guess, but maybe I did the math wrong while I was recording or something. Anyway, we end up with 20 chemical plants in this blueprint, all making carbon nanotubes. The raw crystals get proliferated, and the output carbon nanotubes get proliferated as well. So here I'm requesting my proliferator. I've got it the wrong way. I've got it sideways. I think I finally get it lined up here. There we go. So now I'm doing the math to name the blueprint. 15 recipes with 2 output is 30, but it's going to be 37.5 for each, times 20 is some number. I guess it's 750 would be right. So we'll place power down, and then we'll save the blueprint. And I can't remember. I think we definitely reuse it on the other planet. I can't remember if we use it here. You can see here, it's carbon nanotube 720, or nanotube 20, and then in parentheses 720. I give it the icon for crystals into nanotubes. We input 1800 stalagmite crystal and output 750 carbon nanotubes per minute. So that's the blueprint. And I realize I'm going to need to find more stalagmite crystals at this point because what we have here is not enough for the proliferator build we're trying to do. So everything seems to be working. It's looking good. We're going to do outputs at the South Pole, which we don't have yet. So we need a bunch of foundation and we need a tower. So yeah, this is all pretty straightforward. I am setting up the tower. And, you know, connecting it up with power. Put a little defense around it because this planet's not exactly safe. Power up the lasers. Power up the battlefield analysis base. And last thing, we will request some warpers, some space warpers, so that we can send these rather than have to rely on people to come get them who have space warpers. So it looks like I decided I need an input tower here as well. I don't know why I didn't have one. I think I'm getting power here. I'm not sure. I don't quite remember. No, just space warpers. Okay. And connect it up to the power. Warpers come in. Everything looks good. I think it's off to the next planet now. I think there was some concern about whether the... Yes, I didn't have the warpers set up correctly. There we go. So now we got to find our next planet that has the stalagmite crystals. And so I'm kind of looking around for anybody that has them. You can see there's a bunch of research going on in the background. Stalagmite crystal is pretty rare, at least in the inner part of the cluster for me. Checking every star. And we found one that has it. So I ended up renaming this to... stalagmite makes me think of caves, so I called the system Spelunker. And then the planet that has the crystals, I think we called it the cave. The cavern. There we go. So it's a long ride away, another 12 light years. But we're going to go there, and we're going to repeat that process of setting up. Now, the interesting thing about this part of the video is what I ended up doing when I got there. So Justin had left me a comment suggesting that I get a whole planet blueprint of like an initial setup or an initial visit. That's just the way I want it for any planet that I visit for the first time. So I decided to do that here. So I started with a tower on the North Pole for inputs. That's always going to be requesting basically 2 resources, proliferator and space warpers. We're always going to need those everywhere. And then after that, I think I set up the logistics network. And the other thing I need for a first visit anyway is power. So you can see I'm requesting deuteron fuel rods there. So now we're going to set up the logistics network to deliver space warpers and deliver proliferator around the planet as needed. So we come out of the tower here with those items. And we start setting up power. I think I set up a second tower here to make sure that I had room for additional towers if necessary. And you can see here, I've decided we'll set up like 7. 7's a good starting point, 7 fusion power plants. So we'll also do some basic defense. You can see here I'm protecting the tower and the fusion plants with a couple of laser turrets, as well as the battlefield analysis base. And yeah, now I start heading south, taking the power grid with me as I go. And the basic idea is we'll set up the south tower. We'll set up defenses for all our local infrastructure, mostly for the wireless power towers here. I don't think we know exactly what... Yeah, for the blueprint purposes, we don't know what this is going to be sending, but we're going to set it up anyway. You can see I'm requesting the space warpers so that wherever we use this like whole planet blueprint, it'll be set up to receive and send anything we want right away. And we'll have defenses in place. Like we can just paste this on any planet we visit in the future. So it's a really good idea. And I'm glad that it was a really good tip. And I kind of enjoyed setting it up and the process of taking the whole planet blueprint. So now I'm traveling back along the line of the power grid and setting up defense to make sure that, like, because if you think about it, I'm not coming back to this planet after a first visit for a while. Or it's certainly a possibility. So if some dark fog base spawns and they attack one of my power towers, then the whole setup breaks. So I need a laser turret at each tower, and I need like a battlefield analysis base covering the whole line from north to south. So if they do break anything, it gets fixed. And you can see they're actually launching an assault right here on the planet right now. So that laser turret starts firing. I noticed that laser wasn't powered up. So with that, we've got a good basic blueprint to kind of initiate any planet. So I set up a blueprint portfolio called Planetary, and I ended up using the foliage to represent that. You can see here I'm taking a blueprint of the entire planet. And we're calling it First Contact. And that's my first whole planet blueprint right there. Looks pretty good to me. We'll have to see when I use it again, but pretty handy. I think that could very, very much come in handy. I also decide that since I'm here, I'll go ahead and destroy this base and lock down the core drill while I'm here. Might as well not make it easy for the Hive to destroy my stuff, right? So the missiles start firing, start pushing forward a little bit, destroy the base, delete all that infrastructure, and then lock it down with a planetary analysis base or a battlefield analysis base and a pair of lasers, just like I've done for the whole playthrough. So with that, the planet's set up and ready for exploitation. Now it's time to make more diamonds from the stalagmite crystals we came here for. This time we have the blueprint available, so we'll just set it down. Collides with something. There's some kind of problem. I'm having some issues, but I eventually get it down. And we demand the crystals, set up some basic defense around this infrastructure to defend it should the Hive come along. And then I head down to the South Pole and say, hey, you know what? I want to transmit carbon nanotubes. It's not diamonds, right? That was the kimberlite. This is the stalagmite crystals, and the blueprint was chemical plants that turn it into carbon nanotubes. So now we're done at Spelunker. It's back to Better Dyson to finish off the proliferator build. So not much to say here, except that 24 light years is a long trip, and so I think I ended up stopping somewhere along the way to recharge. Once we get the rockets up and running, we're gonna go ahead and look at building some antimatter. And then we might go around destroying hives. I don't know. Once we have antimatter, it feels like anything is possible. So I stood here in my Charge-O-Matic. You can see my core energy refilling. Then I took off and resumed flight the remaining 13 light years to Better Dyson. I don't know. What are you guys thinking about this episode? If you've watched this far, Like, what do you think about this format? I'm thinking about doing this for the next one too, to finish up the super magnetic rings. I mean, you guys have seen me build copper ore, copper ingots, right? You've seen me build, you know, magnetic coils and stuff before. So I wouldn't do it for the rest of the playthrough, but I am curious your reaction. So now would be a great time to think about a comment you might leave me. Anyway, so we're warping in the diamonds, we're warping in the carbon nanotubes, and we're going to build our remaining proliferator stuff here. This is, I believe, the... Is this the North Pole or the South Pole? What am I doing here? This is the North Pole. Okay, so we're requesting more carbon nanotubes to come in here. And now I'm just looking for space. So next up is Proliferator Mark II. I can't find it in the interface. And we're gonna reuse a blueprint here. So I want to put it here, but there's some kind of weird glitch. There's like a teeny tiny little lava divot there. So I fill that in. Now I can put this down. And so this circuit board manufacturing blueprint is going to be adapted to make Mark II. I saw them swarming in with ingots. I was like, no thank you. So I went and put all those ingots back in another tower. So Mark II proliferator requires Mark I and diamonds. So you can see here, I'm setting up my inputs, the Mark I and the diamonds. Now we're pasting the recipe all the way around to all of these assemblers, rather. Changing the outputs. And I have some iron on this line that I need to collect. So I go ahead and put the iron back where it's supposed to be. All right, this looks good. So now I'm figuring out the numbers. I'm doing the math in my head to get the description of this blueprint correct. You can see I name it Proliferator Mark 230. It outputs 2250 per minute. Proliferator Mark II. I'm going to save that and figure out the input. So I'm doing more math in my head here, hovering over the recipe. We do 60 recipes per minute. There's, I think, 30 of these, so it's like 1,800 diamonds and 3,600 Proliferator Mark I. I think now I'm wondering... No, I think we know the belts can handle that. So, what's next? Next up is another output line. Right. So this was custom because I didn't have enough need to build the blueprint a second time. I just needed a few more. So you can see here, I'm just building enough room for like 8 more. I think 10 more or something. Just a few more of these things were enough. And that was going to be sufficient to finish my Proliferator Mark II needs. We just added another line, sent the input through back into the tower. It's all working. It all seems like it's working, so we move on to the next step, which is building the assemblers for Proliferator Mark III. So I'm trying to figure out where to place this. So we bring in the Proliferator Mark II and the carbon nanotubes, and we use that to make Proliferator Mark III. And so the goal was to do a big build so I would have enough Proliferator for the rest of the game. I use a lot of it. I use it in all of my builds, basically. So I think this was something like 4,000 per minute. And then there's 60 sprays or 75 sprays in each one. So it's totally fine. It should be enough, more than enough for the rest of the game. I'm figuring out the math again in my head here to name the blueprint correctly. You can see, again, there's plenty of science going on in the background. This build produces 1125. So I don't remember how many more of these I build, but I think there's at least one. I think it's like 1.5. Takes 900 carbon nanotubes and 1,800 Proliferator Mark II to make it work. So here comes the second one. Same build. I guess we only use so much. I guess I didn't use 2 full builds here. So not 4,000 proliferator Mark II. Something more like 2,000 and change, I think. Because it was 1125. No, it's even more. It's 1125 for 30. It looks like we got 10 here. So like a third. So it's probably something like 1,800 proliferator Mark II per minute. And now I'm noticing a problem, which is that my proliferator Mark III manufacturing is not working because I don't have enough proliferator Mark I to produce proliferator Mark II to go into the proliferator Mark III factory. So I spend the next like 10 minutes trying to figure out, why am I not getting enough proliferator Mark I? There's some kind of problem. And the answer is throughput. Basically, I realize I'm not getting enough proliferator Mark I from the mine where we set it all up. Like, we're building a lot there, but it's not coming through. It's just not making it here. Not fast enough. So I go look up here, and I'm like, well, it should be available. Why is it not coming through? And I see there's 5,000 in transit, but it takes a while for it to get here. So I add a demand to the second tower. So now I've got 2 towers requesting proliferator Mark I. It's just not happening fast enough. So I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. And I see that little drop right there from 10 gigajoules to 8. And I realize, okay, so these guys aren't going out to get it either because it's not available or they don't have enough power. So I start looking at power requirements here and trying to juice up the towers to eat more power. So I think I like up the max charging power here. And I'm seeing like there's power in the grid, but it's not charging up. So maybe it's not like charging fast enough. I'm not quite sure what's going on. I boost up the megawattage, the max charging power available. And if you look carefully, you can see like the actual charging power is not that close to the maximum charging power. So like right now it's at 70. I've got the maximum at 300, but it's hanging out around 70. So eventually I realize I just don't have enough throughput at the source. So I add a third tower just to request more proliferator Mark I, and that doesn't really do anything either. Eventually I fly back to the mine and realize, or eventually I realize I need to go back to the mine and check on things there. Like, is it not producing? Is there some problem with the production? Is the tower that is sending it not like getting it fast enough? What's going on? So, yeah. I'm still like trying to figure out, how do I fix this problem? How do I get more throughput? So we're gonna head back to the mine at Coal Town. And it's another 15 light year journey, which fortunately we're already sped up to 4x speed, so it doesn't take that long. And we're almost there. I kind of like this format. Like watching it back, I feel like my narration and the music is in real time. The actual gameplay is sped up. It's kind of, I don't know, it feels good to me as I'm recording it, but I'm curious what you guys think. Anyway, I go check out the production here, and I realize, yep, everything looks good. But let's up the charging power and allow it to travel to the South Pole to ship out more quickly. And I'll raise the maximum allowance of what can be stored here to go out. So the it was at like 3,000 or something. I put it up to 10. I'm going to add a second tower to allow output as well, just to try to get the throughput as high as possible. We're producing a lot of it, but it's not traveling that fast. So I go ahead and add a second output tower here to send. I set the megawatt, the max charging power to that pretty high. Now I have a power problem. So we're going to add a bunch more, mini fusion plants here, because I don't have another source of power. Not on this planet anyway, not right now. Not an easy way anyway to get more either. So I add a bunch more fusion plants to consume deuteron fuel rods. Now, that's actually kind of a lot, and it might eventually catch up with us. There's a stockpile back on Allwade 1 of like 6 big containers and a tower full of Deuteron fuel rods. But those might, like, I've used enough Deuteron fuel rods in, like, bringing it to planets that don't have other sources of power that we might eat through that. In fact, I might want to check on that next time I go back. So now we're headed back to Better Dyson 1, hoping that the proliferator throughput is much better. And we'll see our, whatever, 1800 per minute of proliferator Mark III. We'll hopefully see all that working. And indeed, as we start checking the towers here, we can see that we are now getting the proliferator Mark I we need. It flashed by pretty quickly, but we are now back in production of this. So everything is flowing. The Mark III proliferator build is done. We have another 1800 or so per minute available in the network. That's great news. Last thing to do is fix up some problems, a few bugs here and there. And then change the way we're handling distribution on this planet. So since we're making it here, we don't need to be importing it at the North Pole and shipping it around to various factories from there. Instead, we can just ship it out from here. So I'm fixing up the logistics network, coming up here and deleting this, and then saying I don't need you anymore to the North Pole Tower. South Pole Tower can ship it out to the rest of the universe. And we're looking good. We're on track. Our build is complete. And so next up is back to super magnetic rings, and then figuring out the deuterium and hydrogen situation for our Deuteron fuel rod production. But as I knew I was near the end of the episode, I decided to take a minute here to take some more advice from Justin and go visit my swarm and check it out. So I've slowed down to real time here because this was just absolutely gorgeous. It's like flying through a cluster of snowflakes that are hung in midair. It's just absolutely gorgeous here. So we flew out to visit the swarm and take a look. The fact that they actually render these is just incredible. I mean, you can see it's not the most, like, it's just polygons. It's not the most high res. It doesn't have any real textures. It's just got the color and the radiance of the star, like, reflected on it. So there's a little light map or something. But flying through this is just gorgeous. It's just beautiful. What a magnificent kind of experience to just float through space and see these beautiful snowflakes of solar panels, solar sails, hovering in the infinite darkness, absorbing the light of the star. I just thought this was really, really special and beautiful, which is why I slowed it down to real-time speed. So, yeah. That's the episode. Again, I'm really interested in your feedback on this one. I'd love to get some comments from you guys who are watching about what did you think about the strategy I pursued. It's 3 hours of gameplay, like, sped up to 45 minutes with my real-time narration. I feel like it's something I've seen other YouTubers do, and it seems effective, at least as I'm recording it right now. But I would like to know, like, how does it feel to you? Because you missed out on 3 hours of my commentary in real time as I was doing things. So you might have missed a bit. But I am curious, so I very much appreciate your feedback on this one. Anyway, I think the remainder of the episode, I fly back to Better Dyson 1, and I start thinking about what's next. So next up, I think, is super magnetic rings, and then from there into Deuteron fuel rods, which is probably going to be a lot of setting up fractionator rings. Less than we needed to, thanks to Gassy Steve, who can provide some of our required deuterium. I'm not sure how many towers I'll need to get that from as far away as it is. We might need 3 or 4 towers importing deuterium and hydrogen to get it, fast enough. But I think the last minute and a half here of the episode is me going back to the flowchart to figure out what comes next. So let's see if I'm right about that. I don't think I built anything else. I think here I transition over to the flowchart. Yeah. So here you can see we're going to go up to the top here, and we're going to switch out. We're going to remove the proliferator build that we were working on, and we are instead going to decide how are we going to make the magnetic rings we need. So I already have notes on how much of each thing I need. And the super magnetic rings we need for the Deuteron fuel rod, we need 540 per minute. So you can see here, I'm going to remove producing the proliferator as part of this flowchart. So that'll be disappearing in a moment here. You can just exclude it and it's no longer part. So you can see, to make the rings we need, we've got to go into magnets and iron ingots, energetic graphite, which I think we did at the start of the episode. We need, you know, gears and magnetic coils and motors and electromagnetic turbines. And that's kind of, I was thinking about this when I started recording this episode. I was like, they've seen me do that so many times. Is there really a need to see me do it again in real time? So I think the next episode as well will be the same as this one, where I'll show myself doing it, but I'll speed it up, and then I'll give you some narration over it. And we'll try to get the whole 540 super magnetic ring build done, and probably look at fractionator rings as well. I'll try to cram that all in. If I can get all of that done in 3 hours real time, I can squeeze it down to 45 minutes at 4x speed. But that's going to be it for this time. So thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. We'll see you in the next one. Take care.